Welcome to the third panel of today, which is called Speculations. Unfortunately, one of our panelists, Cecilia Valenti, is not with us. She got COVID, so we will only have one presenter. Because we have also have space for screening time, before starting the panel, we are going to screen a 20-minute excerpt from film by Yüksel Yavuz, which was funded by das kleine Fernsehspiel. And Yüksel Yavuz is a German Kurdish filmmaker who was born in Elazığ in 1964 and moved to Germany in 1980. He studied visual design at the University of Fine Arts Hamburg. And his films are mostly shaped around the themes minorities and identity. And today we are going to watch the clips from his film Mein Vater der Gastarbeiter, which is a documentary about Cemal Yavuz, his grandfather, who came to Hamburg as a guest worker in 1968. His father, sorry. He came to Hamburg as a worker in 1968 and worked there for 16 years until he returned to the Kurdish part of Turkey in 1984. So the film depicts the quest of an artist for his roots and reflects on the changing meaning of home and away, like far. The film is not in the exhibition, so it is an addition to the program. And today there won't be a Q&A about the film, but we have the director with us, Yüksel Yavuz. Yüksel Yavuz ist bei uns. So if you have questions, you're welcome to ask after the panel. So let me introduce our panelists. Özgür Çiçek is a film scholar currently based in Berlin. She received her Ph.D. from Binghamton University. Her research interests include national, transnational, minor and migrant cinemas, memory studies, and documentary filmmaking. She has two upcoming books, Kurdish Cinema in Turkey, Imprisonment, Memory and Archive, and an edited volume with the title Audiovisual Healing and Recuperation, Resilience Through Mediated Troubles. She is currently a fellow of Vrije University Cinepoetics, and soon she will start as a lecturer at the University of Amsterdam. So please welcome Özgür Çiçek.
So now my presentation is on this. So thank you so much. So I want to first thank Alexandra Schneider and Mark Siegel for this wonderful opportunity. Frankly, it is for this talk that I dug in deeper on the juncture of das kleine Fernsehspiel and German Kurdish filmmaking and transnational Kurdish cinema. While commemorating its 60th year, my insights are rather fresh. I hope these fresh insights today will be inspiring. And for my talk today, I felt the need to meet with two German Kurdish directors and ask them about their experiences with kleine Fernsehspiel, der Ayşe Polat and Yüksel Yavuz. Their films have been my primary resources for the last 6 years, as I have been conducting an ongoing research on transnational Kurdish cinema produced in Germany. So with these semi-structured interviews and utilizing oral history, I tried to grasp their experiences during the support they got from das kleine Fernsehspiel and afterward as well. To first set the grounds, I will briefly note that Kurdish cinema is defined and theorized as a national cinema produced in transnational space. This is because the fictitious existence of the Kurdish homeland produces hyphenated identities and spaces like Syrian Kurdish, Iranian Kurdish, or Kurdistan Turkey. The oppressive and colonial state regimes on Kurdish people living in the imagined Kurdistan have forced people to move to different parts of the globe since the 1960s. These existing entanglements open up to Europe as migrant and refugee narratives that contain double or triple coatings of displacement, one experienced in the homeland and the others experienced through the process of settling in Europe. So to first set the grounds, I will briefly note that Kurdish cinema is defined and theorized as a national cinema produced in transnational space. This is because the fictitious existence of the Kurdish homeland produces hyphenated identities and spaces like Syrian Kurdish, Iranian Kurdish, or Kurdistan Turkey. The oppressive and colonial state regimes on Kurdish people living in the imagined Kurdistan have forced people to move to different parts of the globe since the 1960s. These existing entanglements open up to Europe as migrant and refugee narratives that contain double or triple coatings of displacement, one experienced in the homeland and the others experienced through the process of settling in Europe. At the same time, within the parameters of Kurdish cinema, unrevealed and undocumented histories are mediated through film, and thus film starts functioning as a fictive archive. This juncture of film mediating unrevealed histories may also correspond to the frameworks on Palestinian cinema, Basque cinema, okay. Oh. Okay, oops. This juncture of film mediating unrevealed histories may also correspond to the frameworks on Palestinian cinema, Basque cinema, and the cinema of the Aboriginal people in Australia. Within this framework, if I come back to the two German Kurdish filmmakers, Polat and Yavuz, who made their first three films with Das kleine Fernsehspiel, I should underline that these films have been rather significant for the transnational Kurdish cinema. While Polat's films have been more experimenting on the form through long, uninterrupted camera takes or surreal imagery, Yüksel's films have also been molding social realism with a rather personal and poetic film form, as we just seen. And while especially in transnational Kurdish cinema, LGBTQ+ characters have been extremely rare, and if there are any, they are rather recent, both of the diasporic filmmakers' first films in the early 2000s have queered Kurdish screens with and together Das kleine Fernsehspiel. I will start with Ayşe Polat. After making two short films, she made her first three films, Auslands Tournee, En Garde, and Lux Glück with Das kleine Fernsehspiel. During the interview I conducted with her, I asked her what kind of a place Das kleine Fernsehspiel constituted in her filmmaking career. She very enthusiastically shared with me that during the late 1990s and early 2000s, while it would be very hard to find migrant filmmakers producing something in and for primetime TV, Das kleine Fernsehspiel was like an island for newly emerging migrant filmmakers. But I should also underline that she specifically referred to the editor, Claudia Trenier, because migrant filmmakers like herself or Yüksel Yavuz weren't seen as filmmakers per se, but as people with problems who utilize film as a medium to reflect and reveal their problems. Thus, their films were received as schwierige Filme, as she calls it, difficult films, problem films, films merely mediating problems, and those films were funded as a social project on and for migrants. Within this landscape, Das kleine Fernsehspiel was like an island where migrant filmmakers could experiment on the film form as just filmmakers. Especially within the transnational trends like Cinema Beurre in France or Black cinema in the UK, Das kleine Fernsehspiel provided a breathing space for creativity and experimentation. They provided free open space rather than requiring films that the audience could consume on television, because they were looking for other films and other narrative forms. To back up these insights, for instance, Karen Rosenberg, in her review she wrote in 1989, questioning the activity of American women filmmakers in Europe, motivates young women to apply for Das kleine Fernsehspiel, indicating that ZDF's risk-taking program provides a shot for emerging filmmakers, as much as she refers, there are nations where television establishes a standard of artistic creativity and political independence by which the domestic film industry can be judged. Lutz Hachmeister would also indicate that Das kleine Fernsehspiel is clearly distinguished from its larger relatives as an experimental and cultural standard bearer. So although this program was also rather well known internationally since the late 1980s, with Polat we contemplated, why small TV game? Why is it small? It sounds like a small game, and it's also because the time slot was on late night TV on Monday evenings at 11:30 p.m., which indicates a rather limited spectatorship. Yet despite all these, it was a stepping stone for große Fernsehspiel, to the big television game, as she calls it. Polat's filmography is a rather good example of this transition from the small TV game to the big one. When we met, she shared with me that her second Tatort would air this week, and in the meantime, her last film, Im Total Winkel, made its premiere at Berlinale last year. In this sense, she underlined that after the first 3 films with Das kleine Fernsehspiel, it was really hard to find funding to move on. But during Das kleine Fernsehspiel and afterwards, she received huge support from Claudia Tronier and kept on producing with very limited budgets at first. She made a small budget film, The Erben, by mostly herself, and later the documentary, The Others, with the funding she got from Kulturakademie Tarabya. Yet after she completed the script of Im Toten Winkel, she got an offer to direct the Tatort episode. So for the last 5 years, she has been actively shooting both for her personal projects and for große Fernsehspiel. From this point on, I will move on to Yüksel Yavuz. During the interview I conducted with him, his experience and choices have been different. He was also very motivated to speak, and I thank him for that. And he shared with me that after developing Mein Vater der Gastarbeiter, he applied to the Hamburg Film Forum, yet he couldn't get any funding there. But the producer Thomas Kufus advised him to send this project to Kleines Fernsehspiel. And in a short time, he met with Claudia Tronier and got approval from Kleine Fernsehspiel and started shooting the film in 1994 in Kurdistan and Hamburg. After completing this documentary, Tronier directly asked him if he had any other film projects. So he basically shares that if you come from a migrant background and if you want to make your first film, Kleine Fernsehspiel would be the very first address for realizing your project in Germany. They discovered new talents. This was mostly because most of the editors at Kleine Fernsehspiel weren't merely looking at the world from a poor German point of view, but they were looking for something different. During the time for making the 3 films, you mature and you become an established director. Especially while working with Tronier as a young director, her questions would be inspiring and significant for you to develop your project creatively and expand your view. Still, all the films Yüksel made were inspired from real-life acquaintances. April Kinder, for instance, was inspired by a friend of Yüksel Yavuz and his family, which motivated a dynamic script-writing process and a documentary-style shooting, because Yavuz himself knew this family and their personal life. And while he was a student, he was working as a translator at an asylum center, translating the life stories of the refugees to the German officers. And hearing all their life stories, he came up with the plot line of Kleine Freiheit. Oops. Christina Krienzel would indicate that Yavuz is careful not to resort to notions of binary oppositions between cultures. By extending the field of representation to include various marginalized groups, including German nationals, Yavuz infuses scenarios familiar from the films of the 1970s and 80s: confinement, claustrophobic spaces, longing for home, with a new complexity. Homelessness, both figurative and literal, is experienced in the 2 fiction films of Yavuz, not only by migrants, but by ethnic Germans as well. Both Kim and Captain in April Kinder and Kleine Freiheit are to varying degrees without proper homes, and thus shed light on the increasing insecurity in spheres of work and life, not only for migrants and sans-papiers, but as a general condition for many late 20th and 21st century subjects. Homelessness becomes a metaphor for the mass phenomenon of unemployment, precariousness of work, and dislocation experienced by diverse groups. Similarly, for instance, Polat's En Garde also brings together Berivan and Alice in a Heim, where Berivan waits for her asylum decision and Alice is left to Heim after her grandmother dies and her mother abandoned her. Yavuz also shares that with Das kleine Fernsehspiel, the migrants become more than just labor power for Germany. They become people with stories, people who can tell stories, not just about themselves, but all other people, and people whose stories can occupy screens. Here was also referred to the tension between the kleines and grosses Fernsehspiel. This depended on grosses had more budget for production and aimed primarily for TV, yet he had a hard time adapting to the norms of grosses Fernsehspiel, now that he isn't interested in making comedy films or thrillers. Yet he also underlines that although he had other fiction film projects in mind, he could not find any funding for his fiction films, but mostly for his documentary films. Close Up Kurdistan, Heavy, and Istanbul Tınıları are the other documentaries that he made for different television channels in Germany, like Arte. Yet these were also screened at film theaters as well. After Das Kleine, it's not easy to find support for socio-realist films. You need to ask around and get names of editors who support political narratives, and such people are getting fewer in German television. Due to this, it is getting harder to make new films outside of narratives revolving around migration. But for instance, he wants to make fiction films related to the Kurdish people and culture and Kurdish politics. These two sources of insights were from Germany, but I also wanted to refer to two other women filmmakers from Turkey who made their first films again with Das kleine Fernsehspiel. They are Yeşim Ustaoğlu and Emine Emel Balcı. Oops. Yeşim Ustaoğlu's Journey to the Sun was also made with the support of Claudia Tournier, and Das kleine Fernsehspiel. Furthermore, the production story of Journey to the Sun is significant and interesting to me because it brings together Das kleine Fernsehspiel and Mesopotamia Culture Center in Istanbul together within an interesting transnational landscape and simultaneity. Very roughly, Journey to the Sun is on three young characters who meet in Istanbul, Mehmet, Berzan, and Arzu. Mehmet has dark hair and skin, and due to this, although he's from the Aegean geography, he is mistaken as a Kurd and goes through police brutality, social exclusion, and finds a safe space in Istanbul with Kurdish Berzan's friendship. So if I come back to the Mesopotamia Culture Center, oops. Yes. So if I come back to the Mesopotamia Culture Center, any kind of Kurdish media or art was silenced during the post-coup government of Turkey in the 1980s. Yet it began to speak again during the 1990s, especially with the foundation of Mesopotamia cultures that I will refer as MKM. To understand the nature of these filmmaking workshops under MKM, I interviewed Kazım Öz, who was then the head of MKM, and I interviewed him in 2013, 10 years ago from now. And Öz would underline the peculiar fact that without having seen any plays, he started acting in theater at MKM, and as well as started shooting and making films without having seen any films at a film theater before. With an amateur spirit, they weren't necessarily depending on any experience, repertoire, or years of education in cinema. What is at stake is the existence of a center around which these workshops could be organized, and a center around which motivated potential filmmakers could come together and produce films. In the same interview, he also shared with me that the very first professional production that all the filmmaking students of MKM worked on was Ustaoğlu's Journey to the Sun. They were looking for a set to work at, and Yeşim Ustaoğlu was also looking for young potential Kurdish actors and film crew to work together. In the end, Öz stated that from the choice of setting to the actors and costumes, this film was made with the huge support of MKM, which provided a genuine filmmaking experience to these students. Even so, with the money he earned during the shooting of Journey to the Sun, Öz financed his first short film, Ah, Toprak, the Soil. Yeşim Ustaoğlu would also state in one of her interviews that to understand the gist of the Kurdish point of view and experiences in Istanbul, she worked with MKM. The choice of music, the cinematic language were all discussed at MKM during the production of Journey to the Sun. It was a real connection and involvement on both sides, and with this connection, Journey to the Sun was produced. So this transnational interaction between MKM and Das kleine Fernsehspiel creates the grounds where a rather amateur group of filmmaking students could acquire experience in a film setting where they could get professional and hands-on experience. On the other side, the political, social, and cultural insights of MKM were firstly mediated, narrativized, and produced through Journey to the Sun and Das kleine Fernsehspiel. The last, it should play, but maybe not. The last documentary I will refer to today is Ich liebe dich, made by Emine Emel Balcı, again from Turkey, made in 2012. It's a classroom documentary on 13 Kurdish women in Uşak who try to pass the A2 German language test to unite with their husbands in Germany. The documentary reveals how stressful it is for these young women to take the German language test, not just because they are living in rural Kurdistan, but also because their relationship with language starts with the obligation to read and write in Turkish while they were only 6, while their native language is Kurdish. So learning a new language appears as a barrier when they were kids, and this insecurity with learning Turkish at a very young age projects itself to learning German as well. So, and the documentary ends in a Kafkaesque way, when only 2 women could pass the exam. So the main character's husband motivates her as, don't worry, you will take it again and again until you pass it. In an interview, again conducted with Balcı, she shares that as her first film, it was a great experience. She experimented on using the camera, directing her actors, and it was during this film that she explored on her peculiar filmmaking style. So, to conclude, when we look at all these films together, that all these films' choice of main characters create a shared and equal social ground, especially for German Kurdish filmmaking, between a refugee and a Kurd, between a refugee Kurd and a German, as in Angard, Aprilkinder, and Kleine Freiheit, a Turk and a Kurd, as in Journey to the Sun, between a child and a gay man, as in Auslandstournee, between tradition and modernity, as in Aprilkinder and Luxglück, a love relationship between an African and a Kurd, young Kurd man, as in Kleine Freiheit, without necessarily creating cultural barriers or tensions between them, but taking it as more of a political and social common ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Özgür, for the interesting presentation. So first I want to start with where you're referring, and it was the context, the topic that we were discussing, it was like discussed so much since the morning, about the transnational cinema. And here referring to Kurdish German films as this transnational, but production-wise, I think it is very different than like Latin American filmmakers that we discuss, is because we don't have, I mean, in Turkey there is no Kurdish National Film Fund, or of course, and in the 90s especially, the only national film fund is the Turkish Ministry of Culture's fund, which was not existent in the 90s, and only the national television was the source of funding. And through the time, maybe just like to open up about like the political background in the 90s, these films were like strictly forbidden to be made. So this is, when we are referring to the transnational, here it is without the national fund. So you said it's close to like Palestinian cinema and Basque cinema rather than the other, which like co-production is also not an option. So at these times, I also wondered about like the production of these films, if they got like any national support, or how was this approach? Because also with like Yeşim Ustaoğlu, the film that you talked, the Journey to the Sun, the military stopped the shooting of the film, so they stopped while they were making the film, and then they had to restart at Istanbul. So under these like difficulties, do you think like is it like a different definition of like without the national? Does it change the definition of like the transnational for you also without like getting no national support or without the option of co-productions. So what do you think about this?
So maybe then we should look at the first films produced within MKM, like films made by Hüseyin Karabey, Kazım Öz, who were then in the early 2000s, who were still applying to Turkish Ministry of Culture's funding and getting some funding there. And with this funding, they were also being able to apply for fundings in Europe. But this was during the 2000s and maybe early 2010s. Now this is changing, and some of the filmmakers from the first generation of MKM students now moved on to making not necessarily films directly revolving around Kurdish issues, but other films and other, for instance, literary adaptations like Hüseyin Karabey. But when they're making documentary films, they're working with a small crew and getting or applying for other film funds, like, for instance, Emel Balcı's case, and they're not necessarily getting any funding from Turkey anymore. But there are also other solidarity networks going on. I mean, the film crews are getting smaller in Turkish Kurdistan, and but they somehow go on to make films, which directly or interestingly ties this with various international Kurdish film festivals all around the world emerging, and also in Turkey, because those films, those newly emerging films by young and motivated filmmakers can also find some kind of space in these film festivals that are organized in here. For instance, Berlin Kurdish Film Festival. There's one going to take place in Köln next week, and there is one in New York Kurdish Film Festival. And these film festival spaces become venues for Kurdish filmmakers to show and screen their films. But if we come back to the Das kleine Fernsehspiel within this context, especially films made by Yüksel Yavuz and Ayşe Polat, their films are also in a way circulated within these Kurdish film festivals, and in those film festivals it becomes clearer that the films made in Europe are obviously coming from a more professional production, and but of course these were the films until mid 2000s, and so there is an obvious difference within production quality, I can say.
Okay, so if you continue with the production, then I also wanted to compare again with like the first panel, and also like the commissioning editors who are deciding the funding of the like third world filmmakers. So it was discussed like there were certain expectations from the filmmaker as the like showing like in 70s and 80s it was like to shoot it at the like produce a film at the country of origin, or have this like maybe like criticizing if it's not political enough. So in your interviews, did you also are the filmmakers, like Kurdish filmmakers, had the same expectations from the commissioning editors, or was the situation different?
Yeah, so it wasn't an I mean, so it was like with interviews I conducted with Yüksel and with Ayşe, they were all referring to the name Claudia Tronier. So it wasn't necessarily like any other editor that they talked about, but specifically Tronier. So I can't say, for instance, if this was a similar experience with any other editor at Das kleine Fernsehspiel. So then this brings in the point that maybe that there might be any other experiences there. But especially working with her, they had the safe ground to experiment on the forum, produce whatever they want. Of course, they were getting some feedback, but they were, I mean, constructive feedbacks, and yeah, so it was a, in a way, beneficial working condition on both ends. But of course, you know, this cannot be like a coincidence to come across Rania also in Yeşim Ustaoğlu and this was also something very interesting for me to track.
And before opening up to questions, I have one final question about the distribution. You already mentioned that these films had space in small festivals, also like minority festivals, like Kurdish film festivals here. But we know they were not funded by Turkey, but were they screened in Turkey? Did they have chance to be distributed or like screened, meet with the audience in Turkey?
Well, these Kurdish film festivals are also taking place in Turkey as well. For instance, Filmamet is a documentary film festival that is organized in Diyarbakir. So these films can still have, in a way, a screening space, although limited in Turkey. And also like Istanbul Kurdish Film Festival, for the last 3 years, it's organized, and many filmmakers have, Kurdish filmmakers have these venues to screen their films. And the other Kurdish film festivals that I referred, that are in a way increasingly emerging everywhere, all around the globe, are also becoming venues for these films to be circulated, but also Mubi. Mubi is also another platform where these films are, in a way, mediated. And yeah.
Thank you. So do we have questions?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I have a question that picks up on something that was just said. Or first off, let me say I think it was great that you were able to conduct interviews with the filmmakers, because I feel that's completely missing in my case. But then at the same time, I was wondering about if you could perhaps reflect a bit on the methodological problems that may arise from that. I mean, it's been established not just by your talk, but also by conversations that I've had in the break, that Claudia Trenier was great. But is there and no offense to anyone present, obviously, but is there a possibility that filmmakers may not want to bite the hand that feeds them, or if they say something unpleasant, what would be our responsibility as researchers in how would we then go about making it public or not, or yeah, just if you have any reflections on that.
Yeah, definitely I have. So it feels a little, I also feel like, why all these filmmakers are coming with those positive insights, and maybe it's just the editors, or we are talking about a TV channel. But at the same time, the reviews I brought together from US and others were also referring to it in a positive way. But as you state, I'm, this juncture of kleine Fernsehspiel and my work is also rather new, so I need to expand and find obviously more critical grounds. But also the interviews I conducted, they were, also really sharing very positive insights. But for instance, Yüksel Yavuz would also indicate that this problematic side was not necessarily when working with Trenier, but afterwards. Afterwards, that how he wanted to make fiction films, but the plot lines he was coming with were not necessarily just going around migration or migratory narrative. So he wanted to do something different, but couldn't find funding for that. So then this brings us to the point that das kleine Fernsehspiel was also looking at various junctures that the young filmmakers were, in a way, motivated to talk about. But when you, in a way, state that and consume that, or you make a lot of films on that and you want to make something different, then the circumstances are not like during the time with das kleine Fernsehspiel. I can share that, yeah.
Okay, and then yeah, and Britta, just maybe I just will follow up on Nicholas's question. Yeah, first, thank you. Of course, it was good. It was really informative, and unfortunately, I don't think that Burkhard Althoff or Katrin Brinkmann are, so it sounds like I'm just kind of gossiping about them behind their backs, but I'm happy to discuss that directly with them. But just to be like, maybe to pursue further the critical perspective that I think is absolutely necessary in such a kind of celebratory exhibition and festival. Does Klein Fernsehspiel have a responsibility to help these filmmakers after their 3 films? Or is it kind of using them up for particular gesellschaftlicher Auftrag for like certain social subjects? And then, yeah, good luck getting to the big Fernsehspiel if that's your goal, or making other films. So it would be also a question maybe for Yüksel Yavuz is gibt es im kleinen Fernsehspiel so eine Struktur, die dann Filmemacherinnen unterstützen, weiter Filme zu machen, jenseits diesen ersten 3 sozusagen? Gibt es so strukturell Unterstützung für die Filmemacherinnen, die Klein Fernsehspiel an sich heranzieht, sie dann weiter zu unterstützen? Oder ist es eher informell, wenn Claudia Trünniger so einen guten Tag hat und dann schlägt sie was vor? So that's my question. If it's informal, or is there a structural form? And that's a question I'm happy to ask. Yeah, Burkhard. I mean, I kind of think the answer is no, there isn't, but I'm just interested to hear. Ich interessiere mich einfach. Ich wollte das thematisieren, weil mir scheint das eigentlich notwendig, wenn wir hier sitzen und loben so sehr diese wichtige, tolle Arbeit und die wichtige, so zuhörenden Gefühle für die Filmemacherinnen, aber is that all there is?
Maybe Yüksel, yanıt vermek ister misin sonra?
Also Claudia Tronier hat bei der Preisverleihung des Fernsehspiels in Baden-Baden nach meinem 3. Film mich mit dem damaligen Leiter des großen Fernsehspiels beim ZDF so bekannt gemacht, und ich komme auf den Namen nicht. Also der Herr ist vor kurzem auch verstorben, und also nachher hat Claudia mir erzählt, dass dieser Herr mich sehr, dass ich sehr schüchtern sei, und also ich weiß nicht, was das bedeuten sollte. Jedenfalls, ich habe in der Folge so die Fernsehspiele beim ZDF mir angeguckt, die großen Fernsehspiele, und habe schon den Eindruck gehabt, Verdacht gehabt, dass meine Projekte, die ich gerne machen möchte, dass sie auf keinen Fall beim großen Fernsehspiel im ZDF unterkommen würden. Also so, dass ich da gar nicht versucht habe, sondern beim WDR habe ich versucht, mehrfach, Spielfilmredaktion. Und da gab es aufgrund des Inhalts, so, weil es zum Beispiel das erste so politisch war, dass der Gebhard Henke damals so davon abhängig gemacht hat, wenn die anderen ARD-Anstalten mitmachen, dann würden sie auch mitmachen. Und die anderen Anstalten, also Hessischer Rundfunk oder NDR, die waren gar nicht bereit und verstanden das Projekt gar nicht oder wollten gar nichts zu tun haben damit. Ja? Also so, dass die weiteren Projekte, die ich eingereicht habe, bei denen einfach nicht unterstützt worden sind. Also ich hab da den Eindruck gehabt, beziehungsweise bei anderen Redakteuren habe ich eingereicht, und von denen habe ich keine Rückmeldung bekommen, überhaupt nicht, ja? Obwohl sie an sich verpflichtet sind. Also selbst wenn es denen nicht gefällt, dass sie einen mitteilen, ja? Selbst das machen sie nicht mehr. Ja?
And Ayşe Polat would also share with me that, for instance, her 3rd film that she made with Das kleine Fernsehspiel is a comedy film. And then she moved on to making thrillers, so she had to in a way, work with different genres and in a way to maintain this, constant production. And this had certain parameters to, in a way, work, as I recalled, as I referred, both within big productions and the films that she wants to make. So it entailed great effort, and that's what she shared. Yeah.
Maybe I explain briefly that we are a bit not lost in translation, but we are trying to accommodate a mistake on our side that we do not have a simultaneous translation for those who do not either understand English or German. So we try to kind of bridge it in a, well, not too elegant way. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to refer to what Mark was bringing up, like, let's say, critical conditions maybe in working with the kleine Fernsehspiel. I think there have been many changes, I guess, because it's a group of commissioning editors with different, and it's changing. So my experience is referring to the 90s, beginning of the 90s. And there, I have no clue if it is like that today. I have really no clue, or if it has changed. But there was one really particular problem, that you were handing in your project via one commissioning editor. So you were approaching, let's say, Claudia Tronet. I never approached her, so I can say whatever I want. So. But you were somehow, if you had the possibility then that this person is supporting you in the group discussion where you are not present, so you have somebody who's speaking for you, and then you are lucky and your project gets through and you get a kleines Fernsehspiel, you are somehow linked to that commissioning editor. So you are his or her artist. And this can be wonderful if the collaboration is fruitful and productive, but it can produce problems if you don't get along well, or there's whatever. And then to approach the same commissioning editing board via another one, where the other commissioning editor is still on board, is really difficult. So there is a kind of patronizing structure, or there was, at least at that time, that also verhinderte a lot of things. So it's a power structure still, very much.
Definitely, definitely.
I don't know about time, but we have another question there.
First Britta, then Niklas.
Yeah, I don't know if I should say this in German or in English now, but I think I don't know who speaks only German here. Anyway, I do it in English now. I was the co-author of Yüksel in both first films. I mean, My Father the Guest Worker and April Children. And as a co-person on board, it was, I had a bit of an observant position as well. It was not my theme, but I was involved in creating the film, basically the book, the text. So, but I thought it really, almost dangerous at points, the power that editors have in German television. And I don't know how this is in other, I mean, I haven't produced with others, I have done research in other countries on media, but this form of intervening and permanently, this is like the professor in German universities, you're permanently answerable to some higher force. You are never considered a person in your own right. I mean, and that is a little bit kind of taking up also what Philip just said. It's like you're not taken, and I mean, I found it so fantastic when they say, yeah, you're probably too shy for a großes Fernsehspiel. I mean, we had this problem all the time, that it was always, well, maybe he's not fit enough to do this, he's not fit enough to do that, or we are not as a team, because I didn't have any experience either. But it was not that we were given, it's a myth that we were given a space. On the one hand, yes, and on the other hand, we were permanently under scrutiny. Are we good enough? Are we living up to this, that, and to some foggy expectations sometimes, where we thought we'll never be good enough for anything. And this is a very German thing, that you're never really, or like German institutional thing, that you're never really considered. I mean, you're not seen as a potential in that sense, or only as a potential within a framework that's already drafted and over which certain people have power, but not a potential that, you know, has you know, even as a human being, sometimes you're not really seen as someone who has its own right. So sometimes I find it a bit difficult. It was a space. It was something that we could do at that point. It was fantastic, and I would never miss it. And I underestimated it at that point, I think, as well. But it's also fraught with a lot of problems that are very characteristic, I think, of German institutions and how they're being organized.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, so it's like a little speaks to the conditions in Turkey as well. I mean, with Turkish, you get funding from Turkish Ministry of Culture, and this doesn't necessarily mean that you can make whatever you want. So, but the experiences I brought together today was, you know, dependent on the feedbacks or, in a way, sharings of the directors. And I wanted to share their experiences, and that was, Entrenier was mostly positive. But of course, you know, especially what Yüksel underlines for afterwards, and especially again, Ayşe's change within genres speak to certain, in a way, trends that the filmmakers should stick to. And this obviously influences creativity and freedom of production, definitely.
Yeah, I just wanted to reply to Mark's question, because actually I've been working in the same head editorial department of ZDF's Das kleine Fernsehspiel. And I also had an internship in the summer in the editorial department. And my opinion, or what I've seen, is that there are some structures like a director's program where people are nowadays, if they manage to get a part of being some director, or mainly a director or writer for Das kleine Fernsehspiel, they are also, yeah, like people tell that they have done great work, or people see that they have done great work. And nowadays, what is one thing that is happening is that they are, yeah, like for series programs, like they get to direct like one episode, and after that they can develop further in the house. For example, for the big Fernsehspiel. In my opinion, what's the problem, and what I can see what is developing right now, is that the singular editorial departments still need to work on working together more collaboratively. And like, if they have someone with a great talent in their working area, like in the films that were created for this certain editorial department, they need to be shared amongst the other editorial departments in the house. And I think this is one thing that is still emerging and still developing, but there are some structures nowadays that are trying to do so.
So do you want to final comments, or?
Yeah, maybe I should also pick up on that one point, that especially you know, films made by both Ayşe Polat and Yüksel Yavuz have something that the films in Turkey have not, and it's the LGBTQ plus characters. That maybe I should underline that, and it's still, for instance, films made by Kurdish directors in Turkey are still having this patriarchal and masculine, let's say, narratives revolving around questioning or problematizing them, but you wouldn't find characters as such in their films. But Yüksel's Kleine Freiheit and Ayşe's first film, Aslan's Tournée, had these characters in the 2000s, and maybe this is also something that should be underlined before we close. Thank you very much.
Okay, our time is up. Thank you so much, Özgür, and thanks for the contributions. So.
Yes, thanks. And I jump in, and I apologize. It's not now the German professor who takes over the structure and the hierarchy. Thanks again, the two of you. But we initially thought that we have time to also screen a longer excerpt from another film preparing the next session. But now I think we had such a fruitful conversation that we kind of went so much over time that we skip that, and we will come together back again at 4:30 for the next panel. Thank you so much, and please thanks again for the difficulties in your panel.